Good evening. Tonight, has it really only been 9 days since President Trump took office? There has been a veritable cascade of activity in this time, and a good deal of it will affect our space policy and programs, our goals, our international partners, and private entrepreneurial efforts. All of this and a lot more coming up. From the news desk at the Center for Space Commerce and Finance, my name is Thomas Andrew Olson, and this is the unknown quantity. Okay, well, unless you've been living in the cave the last few months, you probably already know what the Center for Space Commerce and Finance is all about. They produce the show. What is the center? We champion and strengthen emerging space startups, space scalable small and medium enterprises, and space adjacent enterprises worldwide through advisory, access, and advocacy across the entire funding spectrum. Our programs fortify business plans and investor readiness for founding teams of varying levels of development. One of our latest initiatives, of course, is our monthly space microgrants, where we award $1,000 every month to an aspiring startup. And the link is coming up. It's spacemicrofund.com. And if you want to apply for a microgrant, we still have a couple days left in January. The form is right there on the page, and it's very easy to submit. And we also encourage our listeners and all our fans to help support space microgrants. And so at the bottom of that page, and also there's a little link on our screen tonight. There's a link to our support page where you get the option of giving either a one-time gift or a monthly subscription. Think about that. $50 a month for 6 months or more helps a lot of new firms get out of the garage. Thanks in advance. Joining me now is one of my favorite podcast producers, entrepreneur, one of my oldest space friends, Michael Lane from Liftport. Michael, great seeing you, man.
Hey, as how always. Are you?
Yeah, doing all right. Doing all right. In good shape for the shape I'm in, or something. I'm sore. I my whole sleep cycle was messed up today. I finally got back to the gym for the first time in like 2 months.
Right on.
Since I had that surgery, and now I'm just one big body ache with all the all the pain that you get. You know, the lactic acid buildup. It's like, oh man. First, I couldn't sleep for shit, and I got up at 4 a.m. Then I find, oh god, I passed out at like 10 o'clock, and I was snoozing, and then I did it again, and then, oh god,
well,
I need to get out more.
Hats off to you, because I haven't been to the gym in a year. Lots of physical therapy, but not the gym workout. You know, the thing that's making me laugh is that my 80-year-old mother and I go for a 2-mile walk every week. So and she can book. She can get out there. So yeah. Yeah, it's fun. Well, good for you. Good for you getting back into it, because I know.
I just realized I'm fine going to some changes anyway, and it's like, look, I know now I'm just past 70, maybe 71 next month. There's less in front of me than there is behind me, and I want to make it as healthy as I can make it.
Right on. Yeah.
To whenever that, bitter end finally happens. At least, I want to die young late in life. That's what I want to do, and that's what I'm working on. But yeah, I still got this. As long as I still have this, I'm going to be doing this show.
Right on. Right on.
Yeah, you guys, whatever. When I'm 90, you're going to want to replace me. I said, "Come on, Tom, lay it down, man." Yeah, I'm like, I can still do it.
Yeah. We got some cool shows coming up, that's for sure.
Yeah, we do. So we got a crap ton of news we're going to go over for this week, and probably a whole bunch of stuff we probably could have talked about and just didn't have time for it for an hour. But we got a whole bunch of items here, at least 9 of them that I can count. But I want to lead off. We have a clip. We don't get to do this much. We're going to lead off with a clip for our news cycle. I think it's going to be good.
Give me 1 second. Let me get there. There we go.
Into new and beautiful horizons and we will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars.
Get over here.
So yeah, the look on Elon's face is of course priceless on this.
Right.
And, but that reads up to our first topic now. As the entire space program up to this point and the plans they had up to this point completely going to change now.
Right. I just want to point out, I've met Musk a couple times. He's an interesting cat. This guy looks like he's about to cry. And I love that about that because he's not a very kind of emotive guy, but just like his cheeks are red. And I'm like, he's just hit one of his life goals right here, right? Like it just got a lot closer. So
in a way, it was mine too, because I was in the room the day he decided to found SpaceX.
That's right. You were
24 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a big in a way, it's a big moment for me too. It's like we finally have the means to do it. We've been talking about this stuff and talking about it and arguing about it. Like we got something now. We got something in our hand that could work. But this is going to raise a lot of questions now, and it has been in the minds of a lot of people. They're not panicking, but they're going on like the moon guys are all losing their heads.
Right.
We guys going to dump the moon now and go straight to Mars? That we can't do that. That's the most irresponsible thing we could possibly do. How can we do this? Oh God, I'm crying. And so I thought, no, I think we're going to go to the moon. I just don't think we're going to do it the same way.
I hope that's true. As a lunatic who has been converted to a Martian, like I came to Mars late.
Yeah.
Only in the last 3 years. But I still think that the moon is the right first step. But I believe there's probably a way to do both if there is capital behind it.
Yeah. That's it.
The amount of work necessary to pull off both, I don't know if there's enough in the treasury, not with a $37 trillion national debt and $1 trillion of interest. I don't know where they get that money. So
they don't. And then, in fact, again, Mr. Cassandra here, I made a presentation about that at a Mars Society conference in Toronto in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing projections from way back then. And I was looking at what the government actually spent its money on in 1961 versus what it was projected to spend its money on as early as 2010, never mind 2025.
Okay.
And the numbers just didn't work. Even then, they didn't work. We couldn't go it alone anytime, even then.
Right.
Because we only spent, during Apollo era, we spent 4% of the entire national outlay on the Apollo program.
Mm-hmm.
We spent 27% of the budget on what we now call entitlement spending. That's every welfare program we had at the time, Social Security, the whole thing, right? That was it. And then I think everything else went to the military and other, and housing and urban development, little things like this. Those programs weren't very big. And again, compared to what we spend now, and NASA's budget today is only 1/3 of 1%.
Right.
Current expenditure. And they got 4% in 1965.
Right.
That's so
12 times more relative money.
Yeah.
Right. So, we've still got Musk up on this screen, um, the kind of second in command has left Doge already, and here's a guy who's like, oh, let's cut $2 trillion from a $7 trillion budget. And then they start looking at the math and they're like, well, that's really hard because, as you just said, entitlements and the military. We're going to talk about the new military budget here in a minute.
Right.
But there's something has to give. Not everybody gets what they want from this new administration. Not everybody gets what they want. So
where is Margaret Thatcher when you need her? She would have just stood up and said, and she did stand up and say during her time, says, we don't have the money anymore. Tough it out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I don't know how you get a speeded up timetable to Mars, accomplish the moon, increase the military budget by another $200 billion, again, 8 times more than NASA's current budget,
right?
And then cut the federal budget by $2 trillion.
If they succeed in cutting it by $2 trillion, it's still not enough. We're still $1 trillion shy. We only spend about $4.5 trillion out of taxes, and so you're still running, $5.5 trillion, or more, almost $6 trillion.
Right.
So you're still running a big deficit. So I don't know where you go with that.
Yeah, no, so it's like on the one side, everybody that I know in the space community, a lot of them are in the military space community. We're all like, woohoo, Mars, right? Woohoo, the moon, right?
Oh, yeah.
But there are some really hard questions ahead of us that do not have easy answers.
That's true.
Somebody is going to be disappointed, and I think that starts now, right?
Absolutely. As a not so closeted Martian,
right,
all the way, since 1996,
right.
Yeah, I read this weird book by a guy named Zubrin, and I just went down the rabbit hole and never came out.
I have his latest book on my desk.
Little Red Book, you got it.
Yep. Oops.
Okay. Well, but on that topic, because one of the things I looked at was a Space Review article I saw earlier this week, and not that one. We can talk about that a little bit. The other one about there was this is maybe how it ends up happening. There's a lot of stuff he doesn't talk about. This guy who wrote this, he was a 40-year veteran of space and defense engineering contracting. And very early in his career, he actually tested the ascent stage engines for the LEM, the Apollo LEM. So he goes back that far at Gerald Black. And so have a guy like that do the analysis and compare between what Starship is capable of and SLS. He ended up on the side of Starship all the way by a factor of 10, because it's just a cheaper, faster, better way of doing it. If we actually are serious about getting somewhere and getting it done in a reasonable amount of time. But I mean, he's just another guy who's expressing what many of us have expressed about SLS for years, for a decade. We've been talking about this. When it costs $4 billion to launch one of them, you're not going to get very far very quickly. That's just.
What were you telling me about Orion versus?
Oh yeah, the original. Well, I saw the original development cost for Orion capsules like $8 billion, and I think the development cost for the original Dragon capsule, not the human one, but the original one to carry cargo, was 1/10 of that. Wow. And it wasn't much doing after that to get it up to be a human-rated flight capsule. And so, is Orion really 10 times the capsule that?
No, it's
the other one is. I'm not seeing it. No. I'm just not seeing it. And he talks a lot about. So he makes a really elegant argument about. Listen, we're going down a wrong path. Let's fly out SLS 2 and 3, Artemis 2 and 3. 4 is kind of on the drawing board. It's still being worked on, but just nowhere close to being built. It wasn't going to be flying until 2028, and it was probably going to get pushed back to 29 anyway, because of all the the overruns and the the always glitches that show up. But 2 and 3 are pretty much built.
Yeah,
and so we'll probably go ahead with those. And one of those I think would be a landing mission. The third one would be a landing mission. The second one puts people in orbit around the moon for a while. And Artemis 3 was supposed to be a landing mission. And so you still get your flags and footprints.
Right.
But now we go to the workhorse stuff that'll actually get shit done.
Nice.
On the moon and beyond at a reasonable cost. And which is what Starship's supposed to be built for. And there may be other things. I know Blue Origin had a nice little lander, a cute little lander on the drawing board that they might be able to get some use out of down the road as well, if they can build it quickly and it can be operational in quantity.
Well, everybody on this call knows that I'm a Starship fanboy. I coined the phrase. Michael Mealy and I coined the phrase Starship Singularity, and I think that absolutely everything changes once you hit the cadence that that SpaceX has talked about. The whole world changes, or point-to-point suborbital changes. Everything in LEO and GEO changes. Access to the moon changes. I don't think it's the solution for active development on the moon. The amount of exhaust that comes out of that thing, the lunar, I'm going to call it atmosphere. I know that that's not technically accurate, but the lunar atmosphere is so ridiculously thin. There's nothing to stop it, and the exhaust of this thing is going to be a kind of a disaster for the moon. So I don't think it's going to be the pretty picnic that other people think it is. I do think that Orion has a place in the ecosystem until there is a functioning replacement. So that's kind of my only two pushbacks here. But yeah, things have to change, right? This line in here about 130 times. Oh, I've lost it here. Here we go. 130 Starship launches can be made for the same cost as one launch of SLS and Orion. Now that's he says in the farther future, right?
It's still mind-boggling.
$10 million or less, and in the very long term, 2 to 3 million. That's bonkers to me.
Yeah.
A reasonable guess is $40 million. So that's the author saying that's what they're going to charge. Who knows? Nobody really knows. But that is a pretty astounding ratio, right? 130 Starship launches.
And for a lot of this stuff, if you want to deliver supplies or something else, you don't even need Starship. If Starship takes its time getting ready, you've got Falcon Heavy.
Yeah.
Falcon Heavy, 2 Falcon Heavies will carry as much more payload than 1 SLS.
Yep. Easily
to the moon, not a problem. So you've also got that arrow in your quiver that you can use. And then it raises the question, which, of course, the author here doesn't raise. He's just doing an apples to apples comparison of these two systems. But we also, in terms of total policy, then, is Gateway also on the chopping block? I was never a fan of Gateway. Like some people are never Trumpers. I was a never Gateway guy.
I was a never Gateway guy. Right. I'm about 80% no Gateway, but I'm not 100%. That one, they're near rectilinear halo orbit. It's interesting. It adds both some complexity to my lunar elevator and some opportunity. Mm-hmm. So I'm about 80% no on that, but I'm not 100%.
That's a lot of money you got to spend to build that thing.
It is. And what do you get for it, right? And especially given this picture, is this going to stop Gateway from happening, right? Like that is a big open question. And there's a heck of a lot going on at NASA right now that nobody knows the answers to. Yeah. There is one article, one line here, almost a throwaway line at the end of this thing. I want to point out. Yes, it's a game changer. We all know that. The space industry will flourish with Starship, and lots of new high-paying jobs will be created. All right, so add in that, and this is all supposition now. This is all guesswork.
Sure.
I'm not. I've got a pretty accurate crystal ball, but I'm not making any claims yet. If we already know that the administration is offering early buyouts, early retirements, lots of packages to quit the federal government. You've got a lot of really capable people working for NASA and also for the follow-on contractor roles that are all over, the Florida and Houston sites, right? Contractors outnumber NASA employees, I think 5 to 1 or 6 to 1. It's some big giant number like that. And you got a government that's about to actively start tightening its belt, and that means cutting staff and positions. How many of these super qualified lifelong NASA employees are going to jump into industry? Does industry want them with their, I'm going to put in air quotes, bad habits, or do they want them with their institutional history and pedigree? I really don't know how you operate if you are, a medium-sized, large-size aerospace company. Do you open the gates and say, hey, come on in, we're hiring? Or do you be very selective like they have been and really focus on the entrepreneurial space sector is really focusing on new young engineers straight out of school that have trainable habits instead of.
And that's the whole thing I was going to mention as well, because Elon even said it outright for a long time. He wasn't going to hire a bunch of ex-NASA graybeards, to do anything there, because he wants to get shit done. And so that's going to be true everywhere. I mean, I know a couple of guys, including my friend Dennis Stone, who was at NASA for, ran COTS and was there 38 years. And he picked up a great gig as director of business development at Avast.
Yeah, right.
Building the private things. And he's traveling all over the world and he's having a great time.
Good for him. I didn't know about that.
We're going to have him on the show soon. But that's the exception and not the rule.
Yeah.
So you look at opportunities over there, and even a guy like me, I'm still 35 up here, but it doesn't matter. They're going to say, I don't know, Tom. So I stick with the entrepreneurial sector because there, as long as you can keep producing something, there's no age limit.
Yeah, be valuable. That's the only part that matters.
That's it.
All right, let's stick a little bit more with NASA for a moment and then shift gears. So another article, I'll post it to the chat here in a moment. Another article, I'm going to put a shout out to Jeff Faust and his team at Space News. Dr. Faust has been, has one of the most highly curated news sites for the space sector. It goes back 20 plus years that I know of, maybe longer than that.
About as long as David Livingston.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So I don't want to get into the top part of this article because that's all DEI stuff, and that's not our topic. But again, this uncertain future for Artemis, this is the quote that we started off with: pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars. Now, China did something really interesting about a year and a half ago. They sent a robot to plant the stars and stripes. Sorry, the stars and a red star. They sent a robot to plant the stars on the moon. And a couple years ago, 3 years ago, I think, the Russians sent a robot to the bottom of the Arctic, and they sent a flag to the bottom of the Arctic. Again, those are kind of claims. So it would have been a lot easier if he had said launching American robots to plant the stars and stripes on Mars.
Yeah.
So this one line makes everything harder, and I think ultimately better. So things are changing. There are shakeups happening at NASA, like super, super fast. They've shut down giant programs. You want to talk anything more about Artemis, or have we said all the things we want to say about it?
Well, there's so much else coming up. I just want to make sure the question was raised on this program. Artemis, it may be significantly changed. It may be dropped altogether and expend it, in favor of a new, more economical way forward.
Right.
And it'll probably also increase the speed at which things get done. And so I thought that was important to discuss. We have a lot more things.
All right, let's move to the other things.
Oh, here we go. This is your big for the day.
I tell you, this is the craziest thing I've seen in a while. Sorry, I need to post it to the chat. Sorry, y'all. I just want to start talking about it.
It's okay. Can you multitask? Can you talk and click at the same time? There you go. Good for you.
All right. So this is an executive order out of the, I don't know, couple hundred executive orders that have been coming out of the White House lately. They are mimicking the system that Israel has in place to deal with missiles and airborne attacks. I don't believe that the United States is in the same perilous position that Israel is. But this is not a new idea. I remember as a kid, I'm 57 now, so a little bit younger than Tom. I remember when Reagan came out with his Star Wars program.
Oh,
yeah. And everybody freaked out. I remember.
I know. I was in my 30s then. I was in my 30s then. I remember the Soviets were completely losing their shit over it.
Yep. During those days, I was an actual card-carrying Republican, so I went to Reagan rallies during those days. Not so much anymore. But these were big things, right? So I was telling Tom before the show started, before he died, I knew Dr. Jordan Kerr, a little bit. He was really interested in space elevator technology, and in fact was a pioneer of beamed power using lasers. And he was a part of Reagan's team to work on this anti-missile system. And so to fast forward, over the past 40 years, to see it come full circle, to me, that is astounding. And what does that mean to the commercial space sector? Like, our job here on this show is to talk about the commercial space sector. It means space-based interceptors, the data lots and lots and lots of data, supply chain requirements, kinetic and non-kinetic systems, so lasers and rocks. It's a pretty big deal. There's a
it's all sorts of things that can carry over into the commercial sector.
Yeah,
and actually add a lot of value.
Yes, the commercial sector. When I saw this, it's an old timey phrase, but was something like, "It's raining soup, so grab a bucket."
That was Robert Heinlein.
Yeah, that's it. I couldn't remember the source, but yeah, it's raining soup. Grab a bucket.
Grab a bucket. I've used that before. Yeah.
This thing is a genuine game changer for the industry if they can pull this off. Again, we started this program talking about how much money is there. There's not. I don't know if there's enough money for this. There's a phrase. There's a phrase in the military that General Shaw came up with, which is space domain awareness. And the industry uses SSA, space situational awareness. There's not really a difference. There's not much of a difference between those two phrases, but you can tell whether you're talking to a civilian or a military person by whether they use SSA or SDA. I think space domain awareness is going to be a game changer. It's going to require on-orbit compute. It's going to require data centers in the sky. It's going to require sensors that are way more powerful than we currently have. The AI necessary to process this data is boggling in scope. There's 10,500, 11,000 objects in the sky that are man-made, and then 20,000 debris elements that are big enough to bother with, and then 1 million debris objects beyond that, millions of debris objects. Calculating if satellite 9942 does a plane change on the far side of the Earth and it comes out in a spot you weren't expecting, and then having a red alert alarm, that takes a lot of compute power. Sensors and compute on orbit are going to be a big thing. The satellites are out there are going to be a big thing. This is a game changer for the space industry. More than, and I'm going to say this honestly, more than most of the other things. We may not get to Mars anytime soon because I don't know if the budget's there. But if the budget is here for this, it's a game changer for the entire industry.
Yeah. I think for a lot of this, we're still talking as though we're living in a world of severe limits. When we're looking out into the solar system, we realize there aren't any.
Right.
That's really the point. You have this picture, a buddy of mine puts out this picture of the galaxy, and there's this not even a speck at the edge going, you are here. And and what really drove it home, NASA recently, I think a year or so ago, they launched a probe to an asteroid called 16 Psyche. And apparently it's theorized it was part of the actual core of the planet or whatever it was that blew up to make the asteroid belt itself, billion years ago.
Right.
And so, but this thing, it has in it all sorts of heavy metals, millions of times the gold, silver, platinum, aluminum, steel, everything, rare earths, anything we've ever mined forever as human civilization, to a huge tune. And so you say, okay, well, maybe, because that's one school of thought is, we'll go on to Mars and China can have the moon and there'll be trillions of dollars to be made on the moon. But the asteroid Psyche alone has an estimated value of $20,000 quadrillion. Okay. Who's the first person who taps that? We have a financial system that would invest in the development of entire solar system economy for the next 500 years.
Right. Yeah.
If you can do it right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have an idea for that. I almost wrote it down once, but I didn't want the Rothschilds to, assassinate me. So but maybe I'm safer now. Maybe I can write it down. There is a way to do this.
There's a way. Yep.
And then you'd have basically a new currency, and that would, but it'll be backed by something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
like
so, and you just let it in slowly as you need it, not the whole thing at once. But, and that ends up like the ultimate lending bank. It funds everything we want to do out there.
Right.
Which also goes in with my theory long ago. I said, look, 90 to 95% of whatever we mine in space, whatever we make in space, is going to stay in space.
Absolutely.
For the use of the people who go out there. So, and there's a lot of it to be had, and there's no excuse.
No, scarcity versus abundance. I mean, we're at that threshold.
We're at that edge. Yeah. We're at that edge. We are, in fact, if I don't mind me diverging, we are at the place where humanity was when the printing press was invented. Everybody knows what the world looked like 100 years before the Gutenberg printing press. Everyone knows historical record what the world looked like 100 years after the Gutenberg printing press. But you know what? That transition period of 100 years in between, the records are real sketchy.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of battles going on.
Right. It was very
entrenched, scribes and the people who wanted to print Bibles in German and educate everybody.
Right.
That was a huge thing. And,
I love that.
The church had the world to itself for 1,000 years.
I'm gonna
that's a
really clever idea.
I think about this shit.
Yeah.
This is what
nice. Because it's going to be bumpy, right? Like the next 5 years, plus or minus, is going to be bumpy.
We're in that Gutenberg bumpy ride now, dude, and it's going to go to the next level. And we're lucky to live long enough to see it.
That's an essay worth writing. Like, you should write that. I mean that. Like, yeah. That's cool. I like that. All right. What else we got? We got China. Let's talk
about China's agenda.
To me, it's not so much about China as it is. Let me find my link. It's less about China. We talk about China sometimes on this show. We had Greg Autry, that's Greg Moon, his Red Moon Rising.
Yep, that was a great hour.
Really interesting.
Yep.
This one is interesting for a different reason.
Hit me.
Anderson, the author here, is, in my opinion, the world's best environmental controls systems guy. ECLSS, Environmental Controls and Life Support System. He has a lot of stuff on orbit keeping people alive. He's proposed big ideas about sending a greenhouse to the moon. He wanted to send a rose to the moon during the Google Lunar X Prize days. He knows an awful lot about how to keep people with a pulse in a place that wants to kill them all the time. And, we have a lot of military people talking about, well, what about China? What about China? What about China? What was different about this one, it says most of the same things, but he talks about the space stations. He's like, they have tech that either we don't have or their tech is better than ours. And so this was a lot of the same things we've seen before, but Anderson comes at it from a completely different perspective that I had not seen, which is the life support component of it. They're going to get to the moon. They want to go to Mars. Their space station functions surprisingly well. And they have the tech. So it's one thing to do, like I said earlier in the show, a lot of my friends are in the military side of space. It's one thing to do saber rattling if you're a former military officer and you want people to know that there's a risk. it is something very different from a guy who, as far as I know, doesn't have any connections to the military, none that I'm aware of. Talking about from a purely technological perspective, that the tech is there, they have the means, they have the capabilities, and they're going. That was kind of a surprise. That was a surprise to me.
Yeah.
What do you want? You want to talk about that at all, or you want to move on? We got about.
Here's the thing. I like the idea. This idea. Another weird idea. Here we go again.
Yeah.
Came to me while you were reading off of this. Maybe they have better tech.
Yeah.
That they've surpassed us in tech of some kind.
They have.
Now, is this? Do you think this might be one of the reasons that these guys, Trump and these guys, and the tech bros are pushing $500 billion into AI? It would sure speed up design and testing time, wouldn't it, on new stuff?
It would.
And improving things. There's keeping up or catching up or actually surpassing.
There's some things that I don't really want to talk about on a public program that I'll talk to you afterwards.
All right.
But yeah, AI in space is an as yet underappreciated asset.
I wasn't thinking about it in space. I was just thinking in general. As a technology design tool.
Yep. To
keep us ahead of the game in perpetuity everywhere.
I hope so. That is the plan. It's hard for a 330 million population country to beat a 900 million population country that has 300 million in the 21st century and 600 million in the developing country states. So I don't actually know how we keep that advantage long term. You talked about that 100 years plus or minus the Gutenberg Bible, but I actually think an equal marker would be the 100 years plus or minus when the British Empire, the sun didn't set on the British Empire until it did. Right.
And usually they don't see it coming until just before it happens.
Right. And I think we're in that 100-year bumpy period there also, same as the Gutenberg. So this is an interesting article from a technology perspective. One of the things that came out the other day was that China was able to make oxygen in a new way from lunar regolith. And so it's like, okay, that's just one more thing. So yeah, it's interesting how these things are starting to kind of fall into place.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We only have about 15 minutes left. I want to kind of get through a few more of these.
Yeah, a couple of these things. I know you wanted to. What was it? Was the new money for DoD or Space Force zeroed out?
So I don't. This is odd. Like this. I almost ignored this article because space mobility is not a very high priority to me. I know it is. The phrase they use is maneuver without regret. That's a phrase at Space Force, is to be able to go where they want to, when they want to. And so energy is really important. So
that was my dating life before I met Bev.
Right. That's funny.
Maneuver without regret.
It was so the idea that they didn't ask for more money in space mobility was a little surprising. I was about to ignore this article until I came to this part. Advocating for an additional $87 billion of top line budget for Space Force.
And where are they getting that from, and what will they use it on?
Well, so that's staggering, right? The Space Force budget's about on par with NASA. It's in the 25 billion-ish range. they only have about 10,000, 13,000 Guardians, so their head count is super small. I'm a former U.S. Marine. We used to talk about the few, the proud, and these guys are 1/10 or 1/15 the size of the Marine Corps. But the idea that they would get $87 new billion, it's a combination of a few things. There's complaints about when Space Force was created, they were supposed to pull in all the other things. So National Reconnaissance Office, Missile Defense Agency, Geospatial Agency. There's a bunch of 3-letter acronym organizations that have space resources, space assets. All of that stuff was supposed to come into play under a single banner of Space Force. That hasn't happened. And there's complaints. There's complaints that are reaching, the administration's ears that Trump said to do this the first time he was in charge. Now let's really do it. Right. So there's a one question of, is this just mixing the NRO, MDA budgets into Space Force's budget? We don't know what this means. We just don't know. But the idea of that much money flowing into that lean an organization, that's a big deal. And again, because their headcount is so much smaller, this probably means they're going to leverage industry, and so a lot of that money is going to go to the commercial space sector if this plays out the way that they're thinking. And on that note, same topic, different source is Senator Wicker is talking about a $200 billion of new funds going into not Space Force directly, but the budget for the Department of Defense. Mm-hmm. So they are talking about a heck of a lot of money flowing into this sector that would push the budget for the DoD over $1 trillion.
I'm not real sanguine about that. I don't know. How much more do you need? How much really more do you need?
That's a good philosophic question, right? How much do you need? Wicker then goes in and he starts talking about, he's got this paper that he's pushing around, cut the red tape, unleash American innovation, competitive pressure, decisive action. God, I wish that would happen. That would be a nice change. And then modernize defensive budgeting. It's a pretty interesting paper. I will post the link to this as well. It's really saying, like, look, what we're doing in space isn't working. It isn't working. I'm going to just take a moment. There's a comment in the chat from Dave.
I just wondered if you saw that. I was going to bring it up. Dave's a good friend of ours, and he's I think he's still working. Hey, Dave, good to see you, brother. He's still working. He's still working at NASA Glenn, I believe.
Yeah. So yes, I did 4 years. They were good years. I was glad to get out. I compare that to my mom did 3 years in the Army. My dad did 33 years in the Army. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, grandfathers, Army, Navy, Air Force. I'm only one of 2 Marines in my whole extended family, so pretty proud of that. But yeah. So it does. It surprises people. Can't you tell by the haircut? I'm just kidding. Yeah, I was in the Marine Corps straight out of high school. Boot camp as a San Diego Hollywood Marine, and Okinawa, Korea, and Quantico, Virginia. So that's where I went. Yeah. Hey, so surprise.
Yeah. Well, but on that topic about all that, I mean, we have a couple of things. We have a few minutes.
Yeah.
I think we can cover like two things real quick, and then I'll have some commentary. But the first thing is that that Payload Space article, the hottest trend in space is a defense pivot.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. It was that some guy said, you know, if I had a nickel for every time I saw that, you know, my whole company would be funded. I wouldn't have to raise money anymore. Oh, it's insane.
There's
all the time.
There's a lot of money. You know, the entrepreneurial sector needs to find a client, right? Michael Mealing over at Starbridge Capital, he's like, who's your client's client? Where is your money coming from? Because if it's only coming from Uncle Sam, that's not a space industry. That's just your, you know, never-ending contractor. But if your client's client has money, that's a different story.
Exactly. But I loved his examples. He just listed a few examples. I mean, and these are people you know. Redwire is acquiring aerial system builder Edge Autonomy to boost national security offerings. Voyager Space is now become Voyager Technologies, and they're emphasizing a national security part of their business. ABL Space gave up on launch vehicles to focus on missile defense. Astrobotic and Intuitive Machines are exploring defense revenue initiatives. And rocket engine maker Ursa Major invested in hypersonic tests and missile motors now. And it says the hottest contract in satellite production is anything from the SDA.
It's true. My day started at 7:00 this morning, and during that call, we're like, "Hey, there's a contract out for SDA. Do you think we should go for it?" And yeah, I mean, find the customer. These folks are customers. Non-dilutive capital. It's good for it's good for the industry, but again, is that a sustainable path?
Right.
You know, it's all well and great. Like I made that joke about raining soup, but you know, is this sustainable? You know, we just saw everybody was excited about going back to the moon up until the moment when they're like, oh, let's go past the moon and go to Mars, right? So, you know, who's the customer's customer? I would love to go and get an SDA contract. I think that would be awesome. This is the line you were quoting, by the way, which I love.
Yes.
I had a nickel for every space company that pivoted to national security. Well, I wouldn't need to raise another round. It's true, right? Yeah.
Well,
so
and he's got a good point. And that pivot, it saves you from being part of that trail of wreckage that we have seen of all the companies that have, you know, gone flat in the last 25 years or more. So if you can pivot somehow and make it work, but then, you know, if the demand for that kind of stuff drops, you have to learn to pivot again. And I hope they can figure out a way to do that, which is great. One more thing before I finish up. Stoke Space. What do you know about these guys? Because they just raised a C round worth $260 million.
You know,
and I didn't hear much about them until all of a sudden I did.
Right. You don't know them until you do, right? So so Stoke is a local Seattle region company. All the stuff that they're showing on their screen right now is actually be done in Eastern Washington on the other side of the mountains. But they have a radically different design system than any other rocket. And I don't use that phrase lightly. It is a radically different design than any other rocket. Designing for reusability from day one. They are trying to go for the holy grail of airplane-like turnaround. I don't have any control over this video, otherwise I'd stop it at a few points.
Sure.
But take a look, if they come back to it, the shape of their where the fire comes out, their engine part, it's a ring all the way around the outside of the rocket on the edges, and it's designed to come back home with a radically redesigned heat shield system.
Sure.
It's straight out of science fiction. They're backed by a lot of the Seattle area billionaires. Gates, I think, was one of the first ones in, but he's not the only one. That's their fairing. That's their re-entry fairing on the bottom of that. If you could just see that for just a moment.
Yeah.
From
what I understand, they want to build a fully reusable 2-stage to orbit. Everything can be used again, and they can carry 3,000 kilos in that configuration. Yeah. So it's a good start for a small sat, let's say, launcher. They could probably make some real difference in the turnaround costs.
Yeah,
the launch cost. So
and they've raised $500 million. To put that in perspective, that's the same amount I need for my lunar elevators. So I always love it when they're like, oh, and these are all the people that funded us. So I'm like, oh, and you just need to call all of them. That's all I need to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Stoke is an interesting play. They want to out Elon. They're really brazen about it. So
more power to them.
Other people do too, but these folks actually have the engineering and the cash behind them that makes it possible.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're Elon in 2007.
Well, they haven't crashed anything yet. So
2006 then.
Right. That's what I was going to say. I was going to back up a little bit. They haven't crashed anything yet.
Well, I got a couple minutes. I have couple things to say. And so I guess that's the news that matters to us tonight, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you for your assist as always. Okay. 2 final notes. We want to say goodbye to Leah Malmo. She's been our great co-producer here since we started, and she finished her master's degree, and she wants to get a real job in the space industry, and I don't blame her. And so she's moving on. But we've also, in addition, added someone who's going to be helping us with a lot of new marketing and a lot of other things, and doing what Leah did as well. His name is Sean Key, and I'd like to welcome him, and you'll be hearing from him more as we go on. And so in that last minute, I noticed something, because this is something that I'm a part of, but I'm also kind of on the outside, kind of looking in. And we just applied, the Center for Space Commerce just applied for a $200,000 grant from the Texas Space Authority to do some business plan competitions and space investor summits and other activities, and to help enhance the space industry in the state of Texas. The Texas Space Commission last year got $150 million to award to different companies and even municipal governments and things for this purpose, to boost Texas space. Well, I just heard the other day that they finally closed their applications, and they're what they got, the applications that they got, when you add up all the numbers that people were asking for, it came up to nearly $1 billion. And so there is a huge hunger for this kind of thing. And so I'm kind of suggesting, whether it helps me or not, I just want to suggest to them on an open mic that say, you know what, maybe given all the popularity of this, and there's so much that needs to be done, maybe you might ask Austin for another $150 million this year. On that note, from the news desk at the Center for Space Commerce and Finance, this is Thomas Andrew Olson. Keep watching the skies.